and welcome to the Bodybuilding Dietitians Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today on what is now our 30th episode. Finally reached it to 30.
Yay!
Woohoo! So today you are joined by your hosts, as always, Tyarra and Jack. And as you would have just heard from that massive woohoo, we've also got Allen Mao in the house. Literally, Allen is here at Jack's house today. So we thought we'd take advantage of this and record a podcast with Allen because Allen is currently 9.5 weeks out from his first show of the season, which is super exciting. So today we've basically got a prep roundtable planned. So what we're going to be doing is talking about everything comp prep start to finish.
Yeah, so we'll be discussing the beginning of a prep, the prep itself, and post-prep as well. So when I say beginning of a prep, I mean what preparation we'll be doing before we actually start the main diet. So before we get into all the great listener questions and our other discussions, we'll get Allen to say a word on what he's currently doing at the moment and how his prep's currently going.
Thank you very much for the introduction, guys. And first of all, congratulations on 30th episode. And, thank you much for having me back on the podcast. And I think it'd be really awesome to obviously chat about prep and stuff. See you guys doing so well, having clients competing. I have clients competing as well, so we can have some really good discussion. So with myself, I'm currently 9.5 weeks out from my first planned show of the season, which would be the ICN Western Australia show. So I've been living in Perth for the last year or so. And I got a few clients doing the WA show and a few clients doing the Queensland show as well. And then we're probably going to all head down to Nationals. And this will be my fourth competitive season so far. And so I look forward to it. So, yeah.
Awesome. And how are you finding things this prep as opposed to previous preps? Has anything changed?
Yeah, I think like obviously for the most part, the nutrition training side of things, there's been some small tweaks here and there, but fundamentally it's basically the same. But I think one thing that I have noticed, and obviously this is through personal experience and obviously working through clients as well, my mindset has been a lot better this time around. And I think the biggest thing is that I used to be like just stressing about prep all the time from like start to finish, and all I think about is prep. Whereas this time around, and obviously through the experience the last couple of years, where I'm more focusing on like other aspects of my life, and because I know exactly what I have to do. I just tick off the boxes each day, and then actually I'm not thinking too much about it. So it was just like the other day I was just telling Jack like, I didn't even feel like it's like 9.5 weeks out. Like obviously the body is feeling it. You notice the training changes, and how you're looking and things like that, of course. But I think mindset-wise, I think I have been a lot more relaxed, and sleep has been better, but just because I'm not as stressed about it at this point. It might change later on, as you get more, as you get deeper into prep, you get more consumed by the prep, and then everything's about that. So, but we'll see. Like so far, it's been really good, and I think part of it's obviously experience, and I think and obviously part of it's just seeing how other people do it as well. But so it's been great so far. But so we'll see. Excited to see what kind of changes we can bring to the stage this year.
I think it's super refreshing to hear you say that with time and years of doing this, that you won't be thinking about prep every single day, and it really will become easier and become part of your lifestyle. Because last year when Jack and I competed for the first time, I can certainly speak on behalf of myself. I was thinking about prep every single minute of every day. I was dreaming about prep, it was just counting down the days. But I can't wait until the day to experience something like you are now, and have a much more relaxed approach, but still a very successful approach.
Yeah, I think it's... I'm very fortunate, and I think you guys will start to experience this, like for your next prep as well, is that because... obviously part of what we do is to help people, guide them through the contest prep, right? And on a daily basis or weekly basis, where you do the check-in and stuff, you constantly tell them it's like, you don't have to stress about it, and everything's gonna come together. So when you are so used to telling other people to do that, so part of me it's like, okay, that becomes like, okay, what I have to do, and again, with experience, like what you need to do to create energy deficit and everything else that you need. And I guess part of me probably want to be like, I want to set an example of like, how you can achieve an optimal outcome and without being too stressed about everything. And the fact is, the less stressed you are about the whole thing, you actually get a much better outcome.
Oh yeah, your physique will look way better.
Yeah, and that's a huge part, yeah.
Because I found personally, the more hyper-focused you are on, say, like the hunger and prep and maybe lack of libido and things like that, like the more it'll affect you as well. So same with like an injury, if you concentrate so much on the injury and it takes over your whole training and lifestyle, then it's probably going to take longer to heal as well, or it'll consume you. And I think it's refreshing that Alan, like I can't wait to be able to think about a prep like that as well. So yeah.
All in good time.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, at the same time, you know, I understand it because we care about it so much because we want to get the best possible outcome, right? So it's very hard to be like, because if you didn't have that mindset and thinking about it all the time to begin with, you're not going to be able to achieve something great. But I guess, like I said, being able to work with other people and see how other people go through it and help other people go through that gives you a lot of different perspective on how you can make yourself apply that and be better yourself as well. So I guess not everyone's going to have that perspective, and it's, you know, it's always easier to tell someone else, just be like, oh, just don't stress. But when you're that person stressed out, you know, the last thing that you want to hear is like,
it's not as easy
telling you to not stress, you know. So yeah.
So Alan, give us an example, like compare an average day for you now, you know, in preparation compared to an average day for you during your very first preparation.
Yeah, okay, so lifestyle is very different. I was working a full-time job in a retail store at the time for my first prep, and also I prepped myself for the first prep as well, so you can imagine, so you can, like, you did your first prep yourself, so that's why I understand you how, like, all you think about is, oh, I wonder, should I do more, should I do less, and you know, and you constantly talking to other people or even talking to yourself, confusing yourself, you know, trying to get all this information out. So that was me first time as well, and obviously lifestyle's a little bit different, whereas now I suppose, you know, I get to sit down and very fortunate to be able to work from home most days. I go work in a supplement store on the weekends as a part-time job as well, so get to interact with different people, but like for the most part, you know, now it's definitely a lot more relaxed and I have more time to like prep my meals and, you know, train at the time that I like to train and things like that. Obviously everything else evolved around that, you know, so, but it was first time around, it's definitely, you know, like you're stressing about like, oh, I gotta eat at a certain time then, or I gotta like train at a certain time, and I didn't have a car at the time as well, so that's another factor. I gotta catch a bus to get to the gym.
Oh wow.
By the time I finish gym, it's like I have to catch this the city cat, or like the back to my house, you know, and then I have to get there before a certain time. Whereas now, you know, you have the car and everything. So I suppose, you know, everyone's gonna have different circumstances and situations. But definitely, like, you know, as you get more experience and everything, you learn to adapt to those situations a lot easier. Yeah.
And I think we'll experience a similar thing because obviously we were both studying full time, and Tyarra was working at UQ Sport, and the next time I prep, like I'll probably be like a more of a home sort of business, and Tyarra will be prepping next year as a online coach and occasionally working at UQ. So a very different approach for both of us as well.
Yeah, it really makes a world of difference, you know, being in control of when you get to train during the day and when you feel the best, and also just being in control of having a regular sleep and wake cycle as well. It makes a world of difference. So just little things like that, and not having external stressors of university or people always, you know, expecting things from you. So that's going to make it a hell of a lot more of an enjoyable prep for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely makes a difference. And like I said, you know, at different situations, like, you know, you're always going to experience some sort of challenges, right? Doesn't matter what lifestyle you live, but I suppose, you know, you just learn to adapt better. And then obviously everything that you do will allow you to, everything that you do will help facilitate that as well. So.
Yeah, and it's also, being in something like a prep, it does make little things a little bit more stressful. Like you said, you know, you had to catch the bus to the gym, and then you had to catch the city cat home, or, you know, catching public transport for the average person all happy in their off season, you know, it's not a big deal. But when you're deep into a prep and you're hungry and you're a little maybe sleep deprived, you know, and anxious, like getting on a bus, you just dread it. You're like, I just want to be home and eat my meal now.
Yeah. And another great example is like, like Lachlan, right? Living in college, so he doesn't have the kitchen facility. That makes it difficult, right? So yeah.
That would stress me out big time.
Yeah, weighing everything at a buffet 3 times a day. And
Credit to him.
Yeah.
So we'll get into the body of the podcast today. So we'll start off with some pre-contest preparation topics. So what we usually do or recommend, or what is done before the actual big diet. So we'll let Alan start off saying basically his thoughts on it, and over to you.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, I think I'll start by saying, a lot of people used to refer to it as an off-season, right? And I used to use it, say, as off-season. And I don't know who started saying the improvement season. But
I think it was either Steve Hall or 3DMJ, I can't remember.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome. It's such a positive way to put it because, off-season people used to think, you have to get super fat to put on muscle. And then you see photos of people getting just unnecessary put on unnecessary amount of body fat. Obviously there's so many variables that could affect it, but people used to think off season just like a relaxing time and whatever, and you only start training hard. But we all know that especially obviously this applies for all bodybuilders, natural or enhanced or whatever, that off season, improvements are made in the off season, right? So I think it's important that you put just as much effort, obviously could be very in a much more relaxed fashion, because I think you need to also factor in your day-to-day life and also being able to live a life outside of just bodybuilding. Because majority of people aren't professional bodybuilders. Even professional bodybuilders have a life, have a job and everything else.
Hobby builder.
Yeah, hobby builder like Dean. Yeah, but so it's important that you're taking care of everything else in life, because you know that when the prep time comes, everything seems to be just evolve around that. So I think you need to have some sort of balance in the lifestyle, but still, I think it's important that, because at the end of the day, if you want to get the most optimal, most improvements out of your physique, you have to do some planning like you're doing now, still be tracking your food, monitor your intake and monitor how the body composition changes, and obviously your training will be the most important part, in my opinion, in the in the improvement season, because that's literally what's going to dictate whether you are going to be able to put on some lean tissue or not. Obviously the nutrition side is very important as well, but I think you are going to be eating a surplus for most people, as long as you monitor that and you're not getting too out of shape and eating sufficient amount of protein. You're probably a little bit more relaxed with carb and fats ratio and things like that. As long as you hit a certain calorie intake, then you can still be able to eat out, or maybe sometimes if you have some social events, have a few drinks and things like that. So in improvement season, and my take on it has definitely changed over the years. And I think now, like I said to Jack, when we had discussions about his improvement season, is that I will only push the food up if we are making improvements in the gym, and also plan out your yearly training plan, where you can break it down to different mesocycles. So macrocycle, mesocycle, and obviously microcycle as well. So you can, if you think about it, right, if you have 2 years off season, that's 104 weeks.
24 months.
So I was just thinking 12 weeks of block at a time. So you can probably run 3 to 4 really solid program of say 8 to 12 weeks block, and then you probably kind of chuck in some deloads in between, right? And then you factor in the time of the year, Christmas time, most people are gonna go traveling, family stuff and everything else. So you're probably gonna have I would say 2 to 3 very, very solid training program that you can, provided you're healthy and injury free and everything, to actually make that progression. That's pretty much with this time they're in right now, right? That you can actually see live progress on a weekly basis, and then everything goes accordingly. That's the time where you can really push the food out, making sure you optimize everything to get the most gains out of that. And then you can have some in-between programs where you can be a little bit more relaxed, where you are maybe during exam time or busy at work or things like that, and just to bit of a maintenance phase, and then you go back on another phase to focus on different body parts. So I think just have a overall guideline of how you want to approach in making progress in your physique, and then break it down, step by step. And then I think that will make it a little bit easier as well, having some direction, because a lot of times, when you're in the improvement season, a lot of times people find themselves lost, like, don't really know what I'm doing. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not really, because I'm not as shredded as I look, how I used to look. And then you also feel, you're not as strong as where you used to be and things like that, or worse if you get an injury, right? And it's going to set you back. So having a bit of a plan, and also, I guess, will allow you to sort of to give you something to look forward to, and you can structure everything around that. And as you approach, I guess, as you get closer to the contest time, or the date that you plan to start your contest prep, then you can look at, okay, this is the training program I'll run to start my prep. And then that's the time where you can start, okay, I'll be a little bit more diligent with my food tracking, maybe eat out a little bit more frequently, and making sure everything's a little bit more accurate with the data and everything. They can start tracking some data, maybe not as, as intense as you would in a normal prep, but you can start maybe weighing yourself like 3, 4, 5 times a week, whatever that suits your lifestyle. Monitor your food as, as accurately as you can. As you come closer to the date, then you set yourself up in a really good position where now you have all this data leading up to the actual prep, and you are also, body is feeling healthy, and work on any injuries or imbalances that you have in off season, so that way you are ready to start a contest prep. And for most people, like, you should be able to still make some really, really good progression at least first half of the prep, right? And then you just keep rolling on with that, and that's gonna make things a lot easier, as opposed to go from like 0 to 100. Like, how you hear some people say like, oh, I'm gonna start prep on Monday, so I'm just gonna go all out and binge and eat whatever I want to eat, because I know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So yeah.
Any thoughts on Alan? I think Alan gave a very good comprehensive overview. So
yeah, all I can really add to that is just like for your improvement season, don't waste it, because sometimes, like, for example, last year when I stepped off stage, and I was like, it's gonna be another 2 years until I step on stage again. At that time, 2 years sounds like a lot of time, but frick, the days and the weeks and the months and literally the years go by so fast. And now that it's been just over a year since we last competed, it's just flown by, and I'm so grateful that I have been, persisting in the gym and keeping track of, pushing my body weight up responsibly. But I'm just so grateful that I have taken advantage of that time, because it does really, really fly by. So if you do have the goal to make significant changes to your physique, don't just push it aside. Like Alan said, have some sort of plan.
Yeah, and I agree, and especially taking into account, like, realistically how much muscle you gain as a natural athlete. So like, if you're competing back-to-back seasons, then that might not be appropriate if you're a novice athlete, and you might need a longer off season as well. So there are a lot of variables that come into play. And yeah, I think we did a pretty good summary with the off season. I think we should probably touch on, I guess, the prep before the prep. And I think Lawrence, one of the listener questions, asks, would you rather take an athlete through a longer prep or do a diet before the diet? And I think that gives us a good opportunity to talk about, like, the month or two leading up to prep, and is there a specific body fat we should start at? Is there any other preparation strategies we can do to prepare for the big diet?
Yeah, so Alan, what's your take on the diet before the diet?
Yeah, I think we touched on that just a little bit before. I think, as you get closer to the actual prep time, you should probably start monitoring everything a little bit more diligently. But it really depends on the individual, right? And for us, we know that, when you have client inquire to say, I want to prep for season B or season A, you probably, I would prefer to start someone at least 20 to 24 weeks up, provided that they are already in a decent shape and things like that. Because I guess this is where I mean that the prep before prep Lawrence has referred to is like, I want to make sure that, because obviously you don't know their diet history, you don't know their training history, so you probably need that little bit of buffer time where you can implement that training program that you wanted to run, to see how the exercise executions are, how do they train, and how do they monitor their fatigue level and everything, and what's their lifestyle like, what your sleep is like, and all these things are very important, right? So you can't just throw someone straight into the deficit and, hope it sticks, right? So get a bit of understanding, and I will usually run, if I have enough time, so I guess at least 4 weeks of like maintenance phase for someone that wanted to start a prep. So I guess that kind of extended the prep, the total prep time to be a little bit longer. But I guess you can also look at it as like 4 weeks of maintenance phase to establish an appropriate starting position, and then go into prep. And this is probably especially more important for novice competitors, right? Where you have like someone like seasoned like yourself, you probably don't need that maintenance or prep before the prep time, because you've already been monitor everything. So you just know, okay, the next 8 weeks I know this is what I need to do, making sure I'm in a certain position, so I have all this data available to me, then start prep here, boom, right? So whereas for a lot of people, novice competitors, you probably need that 4 weeks time just to making sure, to monitor, how much volume they're training, how much food they're eating, and whether the tracking is accurately or not. That's very important, right? And also where their psychology is, right? What do they expect to get out of the prep? And I think that's a very, very important part as well, because I think a lot of times, like we spoke about it before, just in a conversation, that a lot of people have this expectation of like, okay, that's easy, I'll just do that, and in 12 weeks and I'll look like someone they see on social media. But it doesn't work like that, right? There's so much that work into it, and a lot of times people break, or those that doesn't have a successful prep, is 99% of times due to psychology, right? So yeah.
So Alan, for example, if you had a client who didn't come to you at 20 or 24 weeks out, let's say you were working with a client throughout their entire improvement season, and then you were planning ahead for that prep, would you consider running something like a 6 to 8 week mini cut followed by that maintenance phase and then starting the prep, doing that form of a diet before a diet?
Okay, yeah, I get what I wouldn't, purely for the fact that like I'll probably run like mini fat loss, because I would expect that if I'm working with someone for long term with the goal to compete, let's say season B next year, for example. For now, like I said, what we just talked about, right? I will have like a yearly plan. Okay, this is we'll run a strength block here, because we're so far we can really hammer that and bring some enjoyment in the training. You can hit some heavy weights. Then we can say, right, and after that we'll run a 12 weeks of like hypertrophy specific stuff, and to bring up your weak point or whatever, and then monitor your body weight to increase your food to get the most out of that gaining phase. Then we can probably run like a 6 to 8 weeks of like maintenance, or slightly in the fat loss phase if you are starting to get a little bit above where we should be. So I think 10 to 15% above your body weight as a starting above your stage weight would be a good starting point for most people. Then like I probably wouldn't run a mini cut before a fat loss phase. I'll probably rather run like a maintenance phase before then you start an actual fat loss, because then I'm like, then it will kind of be like counterproductive, if it makes sense. So for someone planning for long term, there will probably be a good idea to run some sort of mini cuts in between, but I wouldn't do that like just as you're about to start prep, in my opinion.
So I guess that slightly differs to what I just finished up, because I just did an 8 week cut because I hit my peak body weight at 70.7 kilograms, and then I went through an 8 week dieting period just to kind of tidy things up a bit, and I got down to 66.5 kilograms, so just over a 4 kilogram loss. And then what I'm planning to do is spend the next 7 weeks at maintenance, trying to, regain some strength, trying to build my calories up as high as possible. And then I'm going to be starting my 25-week prep on the 31st of August. So what do you think about that? Like doing a diet and then a good maintenance period and then doing the prep, rather than like a mini cut straight into prep.
That's a really, really awesome approach to it. And I will actually agree to that approach. And I think the most important thing to realize is that I think there's no one size fits all. There's no one approach to for everyone. It all really depends on where you are, as far as your training, nutrition goals, physiologically, psychologically, and how you're feeling, everything. Like this is because you just justify exactly why you're doing those things, and they're all perfectly. I think it's awesome from where you are to, and then you sort of, because you are monitoring everything and tracking everything, so you know exactly what you have to do to get out of each phase. So each phase has a purpose, right? And then the purpose is to so that way you can get the most optimal outcome towards the end. And I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it'll just, as Alan said, it will depend on the individual, and not everyone will follow the same prep. And for example, like, I think if someone is of a higher body fat, so above 20%, then it might be wiser for them to do a mini cut followed by a maintenance. But if someone is already like around 12 to 15%, then they do a mini cut and then an extended diet of like 20 to 25 weeks, they might just be ready very early, which may hinder them in other ways as well. So yeah.
I mean, like for some people, you know, like maybe some novice competitor that you think, you know, they have more to lose than they actually think, then you can probably actually run a mini cut as in just be like, okay, this is what a taste of what it's gonna be like, and then see how they handle everything, right? And then you can make a decision. Okay, well maybe we'll just put this season off, and then because then you have time to make that decision, as opposed to being too deep into the prep to like don't want to like put a pin on the prep and stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's such a good point that you make. And it's, like you just said, and it's not just getting their body ready, but it's getting their mind ready for what it's really going to be like.
Yeah, 100%. That's the most important part, I think, yeah.
Cool, so let's move on to the next segment, which will be the prep itself. So obviously we've already discussed this a little bit, but we'll let Alan go first again, basically just discussing his general thoughts on it, and yeah, so
when it comes to the contest prep itself, and you know this because obviously we've gone through that, and I don't know if I have a slightly different approach to other people, but like I like to I know that you can't predict the outcome or to eat exactly how it should be, but I like to break up the prep into different blocks, and then your nutrition and training will go accordingly to that block, and I set a target for each block that I want to get out of that, and then that will sort of set up the next block. And what I mean by that, I'll just give you some examples, right? Like, and one of the reasons for that is I think to break up the prep into different portions, and you can chuck in some deloads and diet breaks in between that. I think that helps a lot of people. I think just psychologically you can be like, okay, just push hard for the next 8 to 10 weeks, and then we'll do a diet break and deload. And I think it will make you feel a little bit better, and knowing like, okay, I just need to get this done by this date, and then get the most optimal, get the result that we want. Then we can have a break and then start the next phase, right? As opposed to like just start dieting and be like, okay, I have 24 weeks left. So break it down makes it a little bit easier, right? And another part is that nutritionally, the way I like to approach, and obviously it's definitely learning from other people and develop over the years and things like that. It's like I think we can both agree that as you get leaner and leaner, it gets harder to lose more body fat, right? We have less and less spare energy available, and also your body's naturally want to bring your body fat level up, trying to make you seek food. That's why you feel hungry. It's signaling you to seek food, and also that's why I feel tired, because it's trying to stop you from further losing weight.
And I think it's important to emphasize that that's a completely normal response. So we were talking off air about this as well, is that your body wants to fight back, and that's completely normal to experience those types of things.
Because, and I sort of talk about this a lot, it's like because your body doesn't really care that you're trying to get on stage in a posing trunk. All your body is trying to care, all your body is concerned about when you have a stage ready physique, when you have a proper, when you're properly shredded, is to actually be like, holy shit, like, we have no body fat, we have no spare energy level left.
Survival.
We need to make you, bring the level up to a certain set point where he wants you to be, right? So that's very, very important to establish. And I think that's why my nutritional approach would be like, and you know this as well, like, I think it's the deeper you into prep, the leaner you get, the more frequently refeeds are required or warranted, or it will help. And you actually end up dieting, spending less time actually dieting. I know it's really hard to like wrap your head around that, and it's definitely, I guess, it's a bit of a trial and error, and it's scary to do that, because as you get leaner, then naturally your first instinct is like, I need to push harder. When you don't see things move, I gotta do more, whether increase your output by cardio, and which is what a lot of people do, right? Just burn more calories, and I need to eat less and less, right? But I think, like going to the point of like, because our body's natural response is to, resist that, right? To stop you from further losing body fat. So sometimes, and obviously then, you can go into the details about like how, you physiologically works, like, or your hormones down-regulates, so certain hormones up-regulates, like your leptins go down, your cortisol went up, and everything that comes with that, and how does that affect the whole body and things like that. So I think the leaner you get, so you actually need to spend less time in active dieting, as in proper deficit days. So the way I break up the blocks is at the start of prep, I'll do like, 6 days of dieting, have 1 day of refeed, and they'll also help me to kind of like establish as a like, how much carbohydrate they're eating and things like that, and see how they respond. And I mean at the start of prep, when you're still like fairly holding a little bit more body fat level and eating decent amount of food across the board, you probably don't really need that refeed days, but I still keep that in there more for a psychological reason, and also help me establish a starting point, as long as I get the required deficit out of the 6 days of dieting.
And even it's important to emphasize that a refeed day is really just bringing you up to maintenance calories anyway. So it's not like you're going to gain weight from a refeed day.
Yeah.
It's just maintenance.
Yeah, exactly. And actually a lot of times, and Jack will be the testament to this as well, is like you actually hit some new lows.
Yeah, definitely.
On refeed days,
Yeah, especially after those 3, because I had 3 refeed days in a row, and probably pretty much every single week we hit a new low after those 3 days.
And your refeed days were high. What were your carbs? What were they?
I think around 525. So yeah.
Jesus, yeah. And I think it's so important because, like, obviously Allen coached Jack through that, and it really emphasizes the importance of having a coach there to explain why you're doing this. Because as an athlete, you might be like, that's completely counterintuitive. Why would I only diet for 4 days and then eat a bucket load of carbs for 3 days? But if your coach can, convince you like, hey, let's try this, and really, showcases to you that, look, it worked. That's where really having a coach pays off, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously take the stress out of that too, right? So yeah, I guess go back to that blocks. I guess break it down into blocks thing. So that's how I would do the first block, and then I expect to get certain outcome out of that as far as how you look and things like that. Then we'll run a diet break and deload accordingly. So my approach is like I will set those points, those dates, and I'll work everything backwards. And probably a little bit different to a lot of people, where they'll just go and see how the athlete's responding, and then implement those things. I like to set those things. I'll say regardless of whether you actually need it or not, I will still put those days there. It's like just to break up the prep into blocks, so that way we just need to push whatever then we need to get out of those weeks of actually dieting. Then I'm moving to the next block where now you're dieting like 5 days a week, so 5 days with 2 back-to-back refeeds. So we, I expect you to get leaner at a certain point. So we break up the blocks, and so now you have more frequent refeed as you get leaner. Then you do another diet break and deload, which is what I'll be doing next week, and then you finish off the rest of prep where you do like 4 low days and 3 high days. But I think it's very important to like you just mentioned that, you bring your calories back up to maintenance, maybe slightly above, and I will only really raise your carbohydrate. That seems to be the one macronutrients can have an impact on us. Well, first of all, restore glycogen, and also, I guess, upregulate some of the hormones that we're trying to.
Yeah, it's the only one that significantly impacts leptin.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not gonna completely reverse the adaptation, but hopefully can slow down those negative adaptation. And I think that when you guys had Jackson on, that's obviously what he's doing. Obviously, that's with the extending diet breaks, so 1 to 2 weeks of that, and that will give us a lot of extra data accurately to see whether that's actually doing what. But I think from my experience and with clients, I think even just from a psychological perspective, it makes it a lot easier and be like, because the leaner you get, the worse you feel, right? And be like, I only need to diet 4 days a week, and I have all these delicious carbs to look forward to for the next 3 days. It makes it a little bit, I guess, bearable too. So
and I think what's really smart as well, and I know that you did this with Jack, is that you purposely put those 3 high days towards the end of the week as if it was, you know, the last high day was either on a Saturday or a Sunday, because it gives the coach an indication of what the athlete's going to look like when they're carbed up. And also, obviously, the athlete sees themselves too, but it really gives you some feedback for how that athlete's going to respond to a carb up when you actually enter your peak week, which is just invaluable data. It's amazing. And I think that when you did that with Jack, that was just so smart.
Yeah, that's so, like, I guess my thing was like, okay, I want to try to make it as predictable as possible. So by doing that, like you say, exactly, you have the 3 high days, and the last day of the high day is the same day as, you know, if it falls on Saturday, you know, you're going to have your contest day on Saturday. We'll structure training accordingly on the same schedule as well. So that really helps in that, like, so I know, okay, if Jack's been running 525 grams of carbs back to back to back for the last 6 weeks, you can have a pretty good idea, and how he looks on each day, you can have a pretty good idea of, like, and also obviously then the food sources that he uses as well, right? Then you can have a pretty good idea of, like, how much you need to manipulate. Probably not much, just a little bit, and you can make some, maybe you can do some glycogen depletion, which we did, keep water the same, slightly elevate the water and sodium on those high days. So that way you're taking as much guesswork out of the picture, and then you can just, so you know exactly how you should look out of those, you know, I guess peak weeks. So that's one massive variable that a lot of people tend to be concerning with, right? It's like obviously, you know, we're not going to get too much out of the peak week, realistic speaking, but at least this way you minimize all those variables, and again, you take away the stress. So.
Well, I agree that if you do a peak week badly, you can definitely look worse, but if you do it average to very good, you'll successfully look fuller. But if you deplete water, deplete salt as well, and
drink a bottle of wine,
then you will probably be drastically lowering your physique. But the only thing I wanted to add to what Alan and Tyarra said was that the increase in carbs isn't magic. It doesn't magically lower your body weight. So if we actually look at the weekly calories in total, we're still in a deficit. So we're not eating enough to be in a surplus. So my carbs were at 525 for 3 days, but the low days were not very low, but low for me.
Low for Jack.
And we actually tailored training around that as well. So on my rest days, obviously activity wasn't as high, and macros were lower on those days as well. And then on the other low days, we had different styles of training. Whereas on the high days, we had the really high intensity style training where like squats, RDLs, the heavy pushing movements as well. So it was all tailored very well to fit the nutrition.
I think that strategy, it's huge. Like I will say that it's like and this is why I do those things. I'll say it's largely because of how it's based on psychology and how you feel at that point of prep, right? So I'm like, you know, like I said, you have 3 really high days to look forward to, but those low days can be pretty brutal. But you know, it's because we're still trying to achieve a certain weekly total amount of deficit out of those low days, right? So by structuring training on putting harder training sessions on those high days, I feel like psychologically you'd be like, okay, I have 400 grams of carbs up until this point. I probably can push a little bit harder. You know, and
like so hard to do a squat session on a low day.
When you're super depleted, right? And then whether it's like actually physically being impacted or even just psychologically, you'd be like, I've been hungry all day, I had no food, no carbs, now I want to go squat heavy, you know what I mean? Whereas like, okay, I had 400 grams of carbs that like you even the energy that you feel better will probably help you get through those sessions a little bit better, right? And then on those, I guess, lower days, or you can look at it as like a depleted sessions, I tend to put like a little bit more high volume, a little more like a metabolic training where you're just trying to deplete your muscle really, but with like, you know, nothing near failure, and just, I guess, trying to get a good pump, and also just, you know, metabolic training, burn some glycogen and things like that. So
it can certainly be very motivating to see yourself with a pump in prep. I remember that on one of my high days when, like, after a week of being on low calories, like actually getting a pump, I just got so excited. It felt good, and it looked good, and it really, really motivated me.
So we have quite a few questions now regarding the prep itself, so we'll get stuck into them. So the first one we'll touch on is one by John Schultz, and he asks, peak week training protocols, training reductions or increases, and why?
Definitely training reduction, because I think, you know, and I'll explain why. I shouldn't say definitely, because obviously you can never speak absolute on these topics, but in my opinion, and I definitely changed my approach. And now I have been that guy that before where it's the last week, I gotta, go balls to the walls, right? Trying to get it, but in the reality is that, in that 1 week training wise, that, you're not gonna do anything that's actually help you put on. Well, you're definitely not gonna put on muscle, or nothing you can do. If you're not ready at 2 weeks out, there's nothing you can do training or nutritionally to make it look like drastically different. So training wise, but the one thing that you can do is actually minimize stress, right? So training wise, I usually, this, I usually put it like a deload style training. Maybe potentially slightly a little bit more volume, but definitely nowhere near. I would say at least 20 to 30% reduction from what you did previous to that. And sometimes I'll even start slowly reducing the training intensity and volume from 2 to 3 weeks out, even if the person's almost ready. So that way, because on those weeks, you're already feeling pretty crap. So, and then also you don't want to risk injury, right? And then that's a really hard thing for me to do, is because I'm that guy that I want to go in and smash it, right?
Yeah. If you've never seen Allen train, check out some of his Instagram stories.
Yeah, definitely. So it's it's very, I guess, contradicting coming from me, because I'm that guy that had done all those things before. But I definitely think deload training, you can probably still go into high reps and whatever. I guess, like I said, a bit of a metabolic training, and just get some good pumps and whatever when on the days that you have a little bit more high carbs. Definitely nowhere near failure, and definitely don't do movements or trying to implement exercise that you haven't done before. So because one of the key idea in peak week is to reduce systematic stress, right? So that way you can actually look the best come stage day.
Yeah, and certainly having DOMs, of course, would just cause a whole bunch of inflammation. But also, imagine getting on stage, and posing in itself is a huge workout, and trying to imagine turning on muscles and pose on stage when you have severe DOMs. That would be awful.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point as well. Yeah.
So, Alan, if you're reducing training volume and intensity slightly throughout the week, touch on how would you structure the training on the carb up towards the show?
Yeah. So what I typically do, so for it, I'll probably do this for both physique and bodybuilders. I'll usually structure leg day. So as the last session, it would be at the very start of the week, or even the back end of 2 weeks out. So that way you give yourself about 6 to 8 days even to do your last leg session, because obviously as you just said, you don't want to recruit you want to minimize any possible inflammation, right? And also because holding your legs itself for bodybuilders, it's super hard as it is. So adding more training on top, you can probably potentially causing a little bit more inflammation, make you look a little bit more watery. And I found that just can have that 7 days, 6 to 8 days, bit of leg day break for most people can make your legs a little bit sharper.
I guess contrary to what some people might think, or especially legs are a special one. I think they're a bit different to other muscle groups.
It's the opposite to the upper body.
It's amazing because you do not pump up your legs, because when you pump up your legs, you'll lose definition in your legs. But you'll pump up every other muscle group. You'll pump up your shoulders and your arms and your back.
The only one that's similar to legs would be the biceps potentially, because
there's some details.
But other than that, it's you don't pump up your legs because you lose detail, especially striations in your vastus lateralis. So that's why people say when they take photos of legs or post session, so you can't really see the definition, right?
That's how I learned. I was always offering Jack after his leg days. I was like, "Do you want a photo?" And he's like, "Dude, my legs are so pumped right now. You can't even tense. You can't see a thing. It just looks like I have massive big thighs."
So that makes sense that to structure that as far as possible. And then like I said, you're not gonna lose any muscle because you're still training, and then you definitely not gonna put on any muscle. So it's not gonna make any difference.
It's not just a bro thing to stop training legs 1 week out. There's actually some reasoning behind it.
So then after that, so the remaining of the week, because the way we run, I like to run peak week, so I'll usually do depletion days, but they will be pretty much on schedule with what they're training. The usual dieting days I like, so 4 low, 3 high. So I'll do 4 sessions of like, I guess, more of a metabolic training, which what they normally do in their normal days anyway. So that's what I meant by training won't change too much apart from the reduction in obviously intensity. Then I guess on the carb up days, what I usually do is, or those days, high days, I'll usually do like a circus style, because obviously closer to that point, all you really want to do is just get some good pump, you know, do some curls, do some push-ups, or even just pressing whatever, like a circus style, just after you have some carbs, just to, I guess, push those glycogen around to where you want it to be. Very, very light, whole body circus style, or even just upper body circus style. If you find yourself like tend to lose your leg details pretty quickly, then you probably don't want to train them definitely leading up to the comp. Especially the last few days, just don't touch it. Just do posing yourself will do more than enough, and then just upper body stuff. I guess some glycogen push around, do some posing, and that's pretty much it. Because you're not gonna make any progress in peak weight training anyway. So like I said, the key thing is just to reduce stress. So probably, you know, that's probably again contrary to what a lot of people think. It's that you actually try to do less to make it look better, whereas, you know, you have
the hard work is done, you know. Just enjoy that last week, enjoy those few days of carbs, and enjoy the frickin' show.
For sure.
So let's move on to the next question. So we'll do one by Corinne Wooden, and she asks, how far out of a competition should you start posing practice?
Okay. And you guys know this, like I'm so huge on posing, because I think that's, you know, we spoke about it in the last episode, where I think that's one variables that most people put the least tension to when they should put the most tension to, because that's one thing that you actually have 100% control of. And then most people don't put enough tension, so that's one thing that you know. And I think, you know, it's realistic for most people to see, okay, I want to have the best presentation on stage. I think that's one thing that you can probably achieve that, right? Whereas, you know, you can say, oh, I want to have the best set of legs, but in reality, if you have like small chopsticks legs, you're probably not going to get there, right? But posing, you have so much control, right? So I usually start off from the start of the prep. So I do it in a progressive fashion, like periodize it like you would with your training program, where you can start off just by especially for a novice lifter, you know, the first block of the prep, you probably just want to be like get yourself familiar with like how each position feels like, what the poses should feel, and get some positions right. So I would say 20 to 24 weeks out, or at least, you know, whatever the contest date you plan on, you know, when the prep starts, you start your posing. Just schedule that in like a training session. Again, there will be a good chance for you to monitor your progress, right? See how everything look, take some photos, and you can compare that week to week. And then just change that. So I'll increase the frequency of how much you practice as we go. And then once you get used to the positions and how every single pose feels like, then I'll start adding in some, for bodybuilders, I'll add in some like lower body endurance holds. This is something that I learned from Peter Harwick when I did my posing with him as well, just to like learn how to hold your lower body, and so the line doesn't go, and that's hard, and you can be attached to that, right? But that's what's gonna really separate you from other people, and the ability to isometrically hold your legs for that long, especially if you have back-to-back categories, right? And then hold that. Then the last bit, you know, you should realistically be able to present your physique perfectly by at least 6 weeks out, in my opinion, because in the last 6 week prep, the last thing that you want to do is to just start learning how to pose, because you already have no energy on training and everything else, just go about your day-to-day life. If you only just start practicing posing in 6 weeks out, you're probably gonna have a terrible time to do so. Whereas if you are ready by then you just go through the motions, because you already know exactly what you should do. And then I'll usually add in the transition. This probably, I guess, not necessary, but I'd like to practice the transition from the last leg of the prep as well, to run each person through like how they can, I guess, just really practice that, you know, that art of posing, and to put everything together. It's almost like a posing routine, if you will, and then just go through the motion. So definitely start as early as you can. Even in your improvement season, you can do some every now and then if you are a seasoned competitor. So
I feel like you could never practice posing enough, and people need to remember that bodybuilding is an art in a way, you know. And when you get up on that stage, that's when you're really presenting your hard work and presenting your physique. So all of those points Alan touched on are so important, especially the endurance, because you will see people who have practiced their posing, practiced their endurance compared to those who haven't. I remember watching some of the posing lessons that Jack did with Allen, and you know, like for like a good minute, Allen would be like, legs on, don't turn them off.
Yeah.
But it paid off because when Jack was up on stage, he just looked flawless, you know, like his legs were on the whole time. He wasn't shaking, he wasn't sweating from his forehead. But then like other people next to him, you know, they're having a really, really tough time. I think that pays off like enormously. And also, you know, like Allen said, even if you don't have the best legs on stage, if you know how to present them, so for example, if you have smaller legs, but you know how to turn them on and really show your best angles, you'll probably beat the guy next to you who is twice the size of you, but he can't tense his quads for his life, you know? So it really is in your control and it can make a difference.
100%. And I think, like I said, for every competitor that take competing serious, your goal should be, I want to be the best presenter on the stage. Yeah. And like I said, that's achievable for most people.
Yeah.
You know, or at least you'll be one of the best. At least, right? Whether you are first time competing or been competing for years.
Yeah.
So.
And you're putting on a show, you know, and one last thing I'll just say is just smile. Like practice smiling during your posing practice.
I think in bodybuilding you can get away with the grimace.
Oh yeah. I mean, maybe in the crab pose, but like I just mean like practice smiling during your posing practice, because if you're not smiling during practice, you're probably not going to smile on stage, you know, and God, a nice, gorgeous smile makes a world of difference. I'm not kidding. Like, especially
Allen's smile.
Yeah, Allen's got a beautiful smile.
People might don't want to look at me.
But yeah, please don't forget to smile, and don't have people screaming at you from the crowd, smile! Like, you should already be doing it, you know?
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to what Tyarra and Allen said is, basically, over the course of your preparation, your poses will actually change depending on how you lean up. So, say if you're doing a side, or let's say a front lat spread. So, say if your legs are coming in a bit smaller, or your one aspect of your legs are more favorable than the others, you can turn your foot out more or less, depending on your, like say for Allen, he can afford to keep his legs completely front on because they're massive. Whereas when I competed, I turned my toes out a bit, and that just makes them look a bit bigger. So there's certain things you can play around with, and like say for the side chest or side tricep, showing more or less of your chest. So like say if you have a more favorable shoulder and arms, you can probably be a bit more side on in the side chest, whereas if you have a massive chest, probably face a bit more towards the judges. So things like that.
Yeah, and you know, if you're ever, you know, doubting it, always ask for a second hand. So even if, you know, you have a posing coach, I would still recommend going to posing workshops. Not only does it allow you to actually practice posing next to other people and really get a feeling for that atmosphere, but you know, for example, if you're posing with ICN, go to their workshops, because you'll meet the ICN president here in Queensland, Jason, and you know, they hold workshops with all of the pros, and you can get more tips and more feedback.
Scout out the competition too.
Yeah, scout out the competition for sure, but mainly about the posing. Just get, you know, like you can never have enough feedback, you know, so.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. So this should be a good one by Zach Martin Fitness. Directed at all you guys. What do you guys love the most about competing and comp prep?
So I guess, Allen, you should go first, because you're actually deep into this right now.
Yeah. So I guess for me, it's like, you know, as much as like, you know, people say like, you know, you do it for yourself and things like that, there's definitely like certain degree of like, you know, obviously it's good to like, it's like, you know, when you're playing a sport, when you're good at something, right, it makes you feel good, right? And then I think bodybuilding is one of those things where I think we all started out with the intent to improve our fitness or improve our body, or improve, it's all very positive things, right? So I think, you know, when you are able to finish something like this, I think a lot of people can grow a lot mentally. And I think for me, definitely, you know, I had the opportunity to even build a life with it, you know, career-wise, and also met a lot of great people. And most importantly, I think competing for me is just to be able to show off the hard work that I put in. And I guess you can, like, we can debate whether it's a sport or not, because obviously some people don't think it's a sport.
It's a sport. We compete.
like I mean, you know, like, you know, you are being judged, you know, at the end of that by people's opinion. So I guess it's it's very subjective in a way. But I think, the amount of time and effort that you're putting into your training, just same as any other professional athletes, right? Like, it's just that I guess this is a little bit different to what people think like actual athletic sports are like, because they see, but like to me, when you have someone like, why would I want to run 100 meters again and again and again? Like that to me is,
or a mountain,
but then people will say like, but that's nothing against, that. Because I think that's amazing what they do, right? It's just like, every single sport, if you take a step back and have a good think about it, it's like, it's not normal in a sense. But obviously, I think first, definitely the sense of achievement that you did this all by yourself. I mean, you did all the work, but obviously, you're going to have a team around you, people around you to support you to achieve that goal. But I think the satisfaction that you get out of that, and I think for me, it's the mental growth, and also to be able to show off that I have made improvements in my physique. But like, I guess, for a lot of people, and you definitely hear the horror story of like how contest prep can really ruin someone's life and things like that. They have a very, very negative experience. But I suppose that's why it's so important that you really ask yourself the question of like why you want to compete. So don't just compete for the sake of it, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Cool.
So Jack, what's your favorite part? Why do you do this?
So I think most competitive bodybuilders or people who do it quite intensely, I think they would still train regardless of whether they could compete or not. And I'm the same. Like, I love training, and I'm the sort of person who's been very regimented from a very early age, as my family can probably attest to. And so, like I said, even if competing didn't exist, I would probably still train as much as I do, have as much dedication with my food, with my training and all that sort of stuff. But the main reason I compete is just because I'm a naturally competitive person, and as Alan said, I like to show off the work that I've done, and but mainly it comes down to just competing. I played football growing up, and I enjoyed putting my hard work against other people as well, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think I can completely relate to that, and I'd probably say one of my favorite parts of competing is it just makes me feel like I'm not alone, because I freaking love going to the gym, and I love being very regimented with my food, and applying all of these wonderful things that Jack and I have learned through our tertiary studies on exercise and nutrition towards my training and towards my physique. I think it is so fascinating, but I love competing because I love the atmosphere, and I love knowing that I'm not the only one out there that is kind of crazy. But, like being surrounded by other people who have gone on the exact same journey as you and who live the same lifestyle as you, I just think I freaking love that. I love being in that little network, of people who share the same passions. And that's why being backstage with other competitors and, on social media, watching other people's journeys, it's like nothing else. So that really, really makes it worthwhile for me. But at the same time, I see it as the biggest form of self-development in the world. And it challenges me on so many different levels. And I also just love being given the opportunity of every single day when I walk into the gym, I have a chance and I have an opportunity to be better than I was yesterday. And I freaking love a challenge. And yeah, that's part of why I love competing. I think we could probably go on about this for days.
It's even like the fact that we are sitting here recording this, talking about this, and there's people out there listening to us talking about this. That's exactly the testament of why we do what we do as like competing in that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So next question is by Ben Davis, and he asks, what are your go-to high volume foods?
All right, so Jack and I have definitely spoken about this before. I'm interested to hear, Alan, what do you love to eat when you're real hungry?
Okay, you're probably gonna be pretty disappointed. Like my go-to when it comes to me, and I definitely don't recommend this to other people as well, but I'm all about efficient cooking and efficient eating. Like I put no effort into my food like Jack would. But definitely as I get deeper into prep, when the calories drops and things like that, I'll put more effort to think more about it. But generally what I would typically do is like I'll switch up the food sources. So naturally that increases the food volume, for example, and I guess that will answer the question. So for example, at the start of prep when my calories intake is a little bit higher, I can use more, calorie-based condiments. I'll use like, things like rice, pasta, and maybe lollies and things like that to fill up my intake, right? And as I get deeper into the prep, I will probably change up my carbohydrate sources from rice to something like sweet potato or white potato, so that way my calorie drops, carbs go down, but my food volume actually goes up. Mm-hmm. Then even deeper into the prep, I'll include more vegetables, green vegetables, or variety of like lettuce, tomato. I think making a huge salad really just fill up your volume straight away. You can probably even do like some sugar-free like jelly and things like that. I put it on some of my clients who's really struggling with food volume wise, and there's almost something like sugar-free calorie stuff like condiments and things like that. But one thing I would definitely say to that is like especially with like a lot of the low calorie or no calorie sauces and condiments, just be careful with like the sugar, alcohol and stuff, because it does contain calories. And definitely don't go overboard with those, and they you do have to track those still, and also it can definitely upset your stomach. So because we see people like do that a lot, right? You starting to use more and more and more of those, and some of those no fat ice creams and things like that. There's certain brand which is like just full of sugar, alcohol, and protein bars too, right?
And it's difficult to know the actual energy content of them because
it changes.
Okay. So I wouldn't differ too much on that. Like obviously Tyarra and I, we've spoken about ice cream a lot, but probably for me just using like the high volume vegetables. So I usually describe them as non-starchy vegetables. So with starchy vegetables being like potato, pumpkin, parsnips, corn, I think that's pretty much it. And pretty much every other vegetable is very low in energy. It's mostly water content and fiber. So if you don't like vegetables, then probably maybe shouldn't do a prep.
Good luck.
But that's pretty much it. Like in terms of fruit, the berries are pretty low in carbohydrates as well. And the other thing I'll touch on as well is if you're at the back end of a prep, then like high volume foods aren't really going to save you. Like you might feel like relatively satiated for a small amount of time, but ultimately it's the low hormonal levels that's going to get you. You're going to feel pretty average because of that, not necessarily because of your appetite.
Yeah, my best advice is, like Jack just said, sure, you get a few more mouthfuls of something and you get to spend a little bit more time eating, which is very enjoyable, but best recommendation to fight hunger is to try to keep yourself almost distracted between meals. So, make sure that you are doing things. So it really helps to be able to take your mind off food. So, for example, if you're going to uni, have a meal and then go and study, or go get away from the environment, away from food, so that can kind of take your mind off of it. And then that will help the time pass quicker until your next meal. I think there's probably a lot of merit to trying to distract yourself compared to constantly counting down the clock to when you get to eat again.
Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely really important, because if you keep thinking about it, it's only going to make it worse.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, distract yourself. Just go for a walk or something, and then listen to a podcast, or even, just think about something that's not prep related.
Yeah.
And scroll through Instagram or whatever. But then again, you're probably going to see a lot of
phone a
food
friend,
photos.
phone your parents.
And just before you know it, 30 minutes, 40 minutes gone.
So the next question is by Daniel, and he asks, when should you expect sleep/libido to be affected? So
okay.
I'll start. You can go.
You go.
Okay, so in terms of, let's go with sleep first. So I think this will depend on the individual, and this is when your sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is basically how you approach sleep and what habits you have surrounding sleep really comes into play. So I think some people will be affected from sleep more than others. I know Tyarra and I our sleep didn't actually get impacted at all, and so a few things that you can to keep a handle on sleep is stuff like getting a good sleep and wake cycle, so going to bed early enough. Melatonin is interrupted by exposure to light, so if you're constantly exposed to the screen, or it's alternatively if you live in a country with that the sun doesn't go down until like 10 p.m., then that will also affect you as well. Other things like the temperature, are you too hot or cold? Are you hungry or not hungry before going to bed? So if you're too hungry, then maybe you should play around with your nutrition a bit more, because ultimately it's probably worth the sacrifice saving a meal for later on, because sleep is such an important factor in recovery and holding onto your muscle and hormonal and mental outlook as well. So anything else you would include, Tyarra, on that?
Yeah, I would say if it's in your control and you don't have to train late at night, and you know, a lot of us are, I don't want to use the word guilty, but we're definitely known for using caffeine quite heavily during a preparation. I would, if that's in your control, try to limit caffeine later in the day, especially at night, because, you know, obviously caffeine is known to highly disturb sleep. And I'd say also, because you're consuming a lower carbohydrate intake, and as we know, each gram of carbohydrate stores 3 to 4 grams of water. With less carbohydrates, you're not going to be storing as much fluid. So, as we know, a lot of us during prep, we pee like racehorses, you know, constantly peeing. So if you can, obviously still stay hydrated, but just don't be drinking a whole bunch of fluids later in the day and late at night. Otherwise, you know, you can be waking up at least twice during the night to go pee, and that can really, really disrupt sleep.
Yeah.
So
And I'll just touch on sleep, and that's so important. One factor is that really a lot of people, or I'm guilty of this, even last prep as well. Until then, I think, definitely individual dependent. And I think personality has a lot to do with that. You know, some people just be more stressed out about everything, right? Then that person going through prep probably not gonna have the easiest time. And I'll probably say I'm somewhere in the middle of that. Like, definitely can stress myself out a lot of times, overthinking things. But where you can see a lot of people where they're just pretty chill out and stuff. You know, they go through prep fairly easily, and then they can maintain a good sleep. That will have a huge impact on your physique and you, because physiologically you're gonna be able to, you know, respond better to things, feel better, more energy and things like that. Now, one thing, and I guess this would be a bit of advice, and I guess a little bit I don't know if you call it hippie advice, but definitely practice meditation. Or like myself, who can't meditate, or that's something that I will be practicing. And if you have the money to spend, have you guys tried sensory deprivation tanks or flow tanks?
I haven't.
Okay, there's something there's probably not enough research to say about it, but I think it forced me to be in the, I guess people will recall, mindfulness in that zone. So that there's something that I implemented last prep towards the back end. I've always kind of want to try it. In 2017, obviously, you know, hear a lot of people talking about it, see the benefits of, like, you know, help you managing stress. And obviously this is, I guess, a external thing that you can use to help you do that. And I definitely see the benefits in that. Like, if nothing in that, maybe it's placebo and whatnot, but I just feel relaxed. And then just that 1 hour of like nothing, you're just floating, you know, underwater of nothing. That helps.
I know that they have one in West End. I've always really wanted to try it.
Try it this time in prep. Like, even just because, you know, we're always constantly being stimulated by so many things, right? Like, always on our phones. I'm definitely guilty of that. We just interacting with people, and always it's go all the time, right? Especially if you have a job that just high level of stress, then you never get a time to like wind yourself down.
I feel like, in life sometimes you can just always be surrounded by noise, and Jack can definitely attest to this. For me, when I eat, I really like to eat in silence, because I feel like, especially during uni, like I was just constantly surrounded by noise, and eating was like the 4 time of day. But, you know, that time of day when you really just get to chill out and relax and enjoy a meal and just like be in peace and quiet. I found that almost as if it was like meditation. So sometimes, like Alan said, whether it's a float tank or just being in the quiet, like sometimes it's just really, really nice.
And for me, it's reading. I always read for half an hour before sleeping, and that if I don't read before sleep, then that really impacts my ability to get to sleep as well. So, because I guess reading, you don't really think about anything else when you read. If it's a good book, or depends what you're reading, either if it's educational or fiction, then you should be absorbed by that and not dwelling on other things that might stress you out, or that you might be thinking too much of before you sleep. So.
Or what I found really nice sometimes that helps me get to sleep is I put my phone away, but then I might stretch for a few minutes. And sometimes just stretching can be very, very relaxing. Yeah, that's nice to do before sleep.
With, I guess, the question of libido. Now, it's a very interesting topic, but I would say, like, you know, it's really hard to know how it's going to change because it's, you know, where your starting point is, whether it's a normal range or not. Some people are going to be higher than the others, but I think we can all agree that it will go down, as you can imagine.
I've never heard of a bodybuilder who's had full libido at their
and I suppose it's all in comparison,
or their girlfriend saying they're full libido.
And I think it's something where, like, I remember going into it and was like, oh, I won't. There's no way I'll lose my libido. Like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, that's right. How's that possible? You're kidding me.
But like, it really does happen, and it sort of just creeps up on you throughout, and. Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's also the psychological factor that comes from because you are, again, you know, you'd be so consumed by the one thing that you focus on, which is getting ready for the prep, and then you sleep deprived and everything else. The last thing that you want to do is probably, you know, have sex.
I'm trying to conserve some energy here.
Yeah. But like, I mean, like physiologically speaking, like obviously, you know, we know that, you know, certain hormones downregulates, like testosterone is one of that will obviously, again, it's the, I guess, the response into, like, to help try and tell you to, like, hey, put some body fat back on, you know, and everything. And I think for most people, once you once you bring your body, put some body fat back on, eat your food back up, and relatively maintaining that, and like obviously there's other variables that could come into that as well. Stress is one thing, like, you know, that could, you know, your psychology can affect your physiology, right? So that also is another factor. So, but we can definitely say it will most likely go down. But if you are in a healthy level to begin with, you, I guess, prep in a sensible manner. You can probably minimize the unnecessary level of, you know, drop. But I'm gonna say it is. Unfortunately, it will drop. So
yeah, but I heard I was listening to one of AJ Morris's podcasts like a few weeks ago, and he made a point that he's like, my girlfriend understands that the purpose of my prep is not to maintain my libido. Like, that's not why I'm going through prep.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you put it that way, like we spoke about at the beginning, right? It's because your body's natural response, because it doesn't care. It's like when the first thing they're trying to do is trying to make you put some body fat back on to increase energy source. The last thing they wants to do is to
it's almost punishing you. It's like, I shall reward you when you feed me.
Yeah.
So this is the final question before we'll touch on the post-competition period. So opinions on keeping in heavy taxing compounds, for example, deadlifts weeks out from comp.
Okay, I'll go. It depends, but I would definitely, like, let's take deadlift for example, and it's something that I'll be doing as well. I will usually try to keep the most of the main compound movements in the program, but I think, you know, it makes sense that to adjust certain exercise depending on your recovery capability, and also gauge everything on the whole program and see everything that you're doing, and obviously minimize the risk of injury, because at the end of the day, I suppose, you know, we need to get, the whole purpose of prep is to maintain as much lean tissue as possible, right? And lose as much body fat as possible. So, and obviously, as in the process of doing that, it is expected that you're gonna lose you're gonna drop some body weight, and you're probably gonna get thinner. So certain exercises are going to be affected as far as the strength drop and things like that. For example, chest pressing. Now, when you are well fed in improvement season, you're probably gonna press, let's say 10 centimeter is a range of motion appropriate for you. Lose 10 kilos down, now you're pressing like 14, 15 centimeters or something like that, right? That changes your strength, and then because now you can't expect to press the same amount of weight and for a longer distance while you're lighter as well. So that's something that I do. I guess probably something that we touch upon, I guess, during prep portion as well, is that I would change the exercise selection throughout the prep. I will tend to choose, and I will say that this is something that I only started implementing, I'll say in the last year or so to now, and it makes sense to me, right? Because obviously ultimately we just want to get the muscular stimulus to target muscle groups, right? So for example, let's take overhead press. For example, at the start of prep, it just you still, at a heavy body weight, you have the, greater leverage and everything. You can probably perform that pretty well, pretty consistently. But then as you get lean and everything else, it requires more stability, right? So then it's so hard to maintain that because you're spending so much energy just by trying to stay in that position and to press overhead. So now it becomes like, well, is it really worth it to keep that exercise in, because I'm not really getting the most out of muscular stimulus out of that. So I'll change to like a seated barbell shoulder press when I notice that there's a consecutive weeks of like strength drop or just a bit hit and miss there of a certain lifts. I'll look at alternative options. And then I'll do seated barbell press, and then for a period of time when that becomes like the range of motion increases and becomes like, well, so much harder to maintain that, then I'll change to maybe like a Smith machine shoulder press, or like some plate loading machine, or any machine that you like, or even dumbbell as well, whatever that you actually can still press and get the most out of what you're trying to achieve, which is obviously creating that stimulus. So I'll definitely, obviously this also changes depending on person, right? Your leverage and things like that. For example, for myself, and I can actually maintain my deadlifts fairly well throughout the whole prep.
Yeah, we've seen.
Yeah, and
230 for reps.
if anything, it's actually probably, I feel like at a certain body where I can actually perform better than when I'm heavier. But obviously there's other factors come into play as well. But I'll definitely, this time around, I'll actually take that one out, because it does take away a lot of your recovery capabilities. So you have to look at like, okay, is it worth it to keep the deadlift? Because ultimately I'm just trying to maintain lean tissue, right? And for the particular body part, so I can probably do like some sort of variations like Romanians, and we talk about this as well, or even trap bar deadlift, rack pulls, or any sort of variation for that posterior loading. And squats, why you can, for example, you can keep your front squat at the start of the prep. As you get lighter, you struggle to keep the weight up, but your legs can do the work. You can switch to like a front squat or something that's quad dominant, so you can still get the stimulus on the quads that you want and get the required volume to maintain the lean tissue. So I'll definitely say, I will probably look at changing if it is impacting you recovery wise, and also if there's any sort of strength dropping, whatever. So
again, and that's why it's so important to stay in close contact with your clients, and not only looking at data on spreadsheets, but actually talking to them like, hey, how's it going? How's this exercise actually feeling for you? And then they can actually let you know, like, I'm really struggling with standing OHP. And then you're like, all right, let's switch that around. Exactly. I think that was a really good example.
Yeah. And like, I will be the first person to say, like, I have been that person that like being so married to certain exercise, like I have to squat, bench, and deadlift. I have to, because I guess that the mentality of I want to lift heavy amount of weight, but at the end of the day, that's not going to achieve anything. Obviously, we still want to, being able to maintain strength and performance, super important, right? But at the same time, you need to look at like the bigger picture of like, what am I trying to achieve ultimately? So if this is not going to give me the outcome that I want, but keep trying to do the exercise, it's just not worth it. So
yeah, I completely agree. And like, for especially something like switching out a front squat or back squat for a hack squat, like coming up to having to do heavy back squats at the back end of a prep is like for some people is very, very difficult, especially if you have more unfavorable biomechanics. And so switching it to like a hack squat, like it might not sound as hardcore, but it'll definitely benefit you.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
Okay, guys, so we're actually going to finish up on 2 more questions which are related, and then we're going to probably do another episode about the post-comp prep period, because we're already at an hour and 20 minutes, so we thought we would do a separate episode about the post-comp prep period, because we don't want to skimp on that, because there's a lot of good information for that. So the question is by Emily Warren, and there's also another one that's related. How do you know when to decrease macros / add cardio if weight is not trending down? And then the other question is, how do you know when to either increase cardio as opposed to decreasing macros?
Very, very good question, and it's gonna be I don't want to do this, but I think it's gonna be one of those, it depends. And I think that's a lot of the question, because it's so hard to speak absolute, because there's so many contexts in that. Like, for example, weight isn't trending down, like straight up male and female, there's gonna be some differences there. So sometimes female may not see weight changes for up to few weeks at a time, you know.
Yeah,
if you
body
want
weight
those-
stalls.
Yeah, and right, but that's through the hormone regulation, through the menstrual cycle, right? So, so yeah, and then obviously for guys it can be a little bit linear, but again, you know, depending on if you're not really monitoring your solid intake, or if you have high lows, change out the foods all the time, that could potentially impact on you might be holding a little more fluid. So weight is a tough one, but I would say, you know, if you are monitoring your food intake like accurately, so all the information data is correct, you're monitoring your output correctly, and you also obviously monitor your body composition and weigh-ins. So, you know, this could be the time that you can use something like a skin folds to see, okay, whether the body fat's coming down, and make some calculated decision on whether you need to drop for more food or not, or increase your output or not. Or I will usually I'm of the opinion that I tend to, whenever I make a change, I tend to let it sit for at least 2 weeks. Still, just I think that's at least 2 to 3 weeks to actually see some response average over time. Because like I said, you know, go back to the part where if you lead into prep, you should have like a maintenance phase or something, so you know exactly that's what's happening now. Then you know, if I make some certain adjustments, I should be expecting certain responses. Then from there, you can just repeat the process. But there's definitely times where, you know, you can be a little bit confused. Like scale doesn't drop, but I feel leaner, or things like that. Then I would say, then you look at like other variables.
Yeah.
How's your sleeping? If you didn't sleep like for, you know, good for a few days in a row, or if your wake up time is different, or if you ate really late the night before, all those things impacts on the numbers on the scale, right? And it's going to fluctuate on a daily basis. So average over time and monitor as many data as possible. That's going to be a number one thing to help you make that decision. But I think it's really hard to say like you have to. But I would say if you stole like multiple weeks in a row, then you need to probably, I need to probably make some adjustments. But then again, you know, don't just drop more food just because that's what you think you should do.
Exactly.
But, you know, and I think a lot of people that obviously, you know, do flexible dieting or track their food and things like that, is that, you know, there's a lot of inaccuracy in tracking. So I guess, you know, monitor all the variables that you have control of and see whether there's some discrepancy there, and then just one by one take it off, and then say, okay, I think I need to put more food out.
Yeah.
And as far as cardio wise, now this is a little bit harder one to answer because, okay, my opinion on cardio is probably a little bit different to a lot of people. Is that a lot of people look at cardio as just the means to burn calories, but I look at cardio as cardiovascular training, and this is something that I've learned and adopted from Broderick Chavez, and, you know, obviously the guy Dean and a lot of good mentors of mine. That cardiovascular training, I think, is serve a different purpose, and that actually has purpose in that, like, obviously not only to improve your overall fitness, overall conditioning, your ability to recover, even just for your general health. But a lot of people, obviously, you know, bodybuilders typically just look at cardio as the means to burn calories. Like, obviously you are burning calories because you're exercising, but I think the main goal is that, you know, don't just, because there's many ways to achieve that. For example, I think most people, if you just monitor your daily activity level, because ultimately that's what most people do it for, right? To burn more calories. But if you're not monitoring your steps, for example, or daily activity, which is your NEAT, then you can do 40 minutes of cardio, but then you do nothing for the rest of the day. Then it compensates each other. So it's like you're not really achieving anything there. But if you monitor your daily activity level, at least you know, like, okay, this is how much activity I'm doing at the moment. That's another data available to you that you can monitor. And then if you wish to, I think for some people, for example, if your lifestyle or for whatever reason that you would rather burn calories to cardio, you can definitely do that. As long as you have ways to measure that, then you can make that decision on that. So yeah, it's a bit harder to have a definite answer on when you should, but I guess, you know, whenever you want to make a decision like that, look at the whole picture and then look at like what is it that I'm trying to achieve, and then work it backwards.
So would you ask a client, would you say, hey, we're going to need to make a change here so that, you know, we can keep pushing body weight down. Would you rather increase daily expenditure through perhaps structured cardio?
Yeah.
Or would you rather have a decrease in 50 grams of carbs? Like, would you give them a choice?
I would, because the way I structure prep, I would typically favor, and this I would say that across the board for most people, so far I would favor just pulling food down and then just keeping daily activity level the same. Increase the training intensity, like obviously weight training doesn't burn that much calories.
Unfortunately.
But like for some people, there might be some extreme cases where someone who works a job that's sitting down all day, that you might, and then time-wise, you might just have to allocate some cardiovascular training to help them get the required calorie, right? And I would say for female as well, whereas if you are a small female already starting with because you can't expect to eat like higher amount of food than someone who's 20, 30 kilos than you. So if you're already like, for example, 40, 50 kilos or 50, 60 kilos and you're on like 1500 or less or whatever calories, then it would probably make sense to increase your expenditure a little bit as opposed to pulling more food out, because then, because you already had little to work with, right? And provided, because you also have to look after your micronutrients and everything like that, so you still have to get in decent amount of calories from those things to essential fatty acids and things like that. So it's probably not ideal to constantly putting more food out. So that would be the case where you can actually increase your calorie expenditure through like even just your steps or actual allocated cardiovascular training to achieve the same outcome. And so I think bit of a, I guess, case dependent and depending on the situation. But I think for the most part, you can probably make some food adjustments, and later on, if you don't think you can afford to put more food out or whatever, then you can probably increase your expenditure.
I would completely agree, and I certainly do think it's case dependent as well. And if on the flip side, Alan touched on someone who has quite a sedentary job, but even if you had someone who had a very active job like a construction worker, and let's say they were averaging 20,000 steps a day, but they were in prep, I would advocate for decreasing food compared to increasing their expenditure, because one, increasing steps past 20,000 a day, that's pretty nuts. And also on like daily cardio on top of that, also considering that they need to do their resistance training sessions too. Like, I think that doing extra activity already in a deficit, it would really start to impede on their training performance as well.
I was literally about to say that, like, that's another thing that when you do more hours and hours and hours of cardio, that's going to somehow have an impact on your
you got to lift weights too.
Your performance, which is your primary objective, which is to maintain performance, maintain lean tissue as much as you can. So if you are starting doing way more cardio than you are doing weight training, it's kind of like,
are you a runner or a bodybuilder?
So you kind of become like a weight loss.
I'm running to the stage, man.
That's kind of like a weight loss contest now, not actually
exactly
contest, right?
What I usually say to clients is, like, say if because a lot of it's very common for people to think like, oh, it's a diet, we got to start the cardio right now. But like, what I usually say is, if we start with a load of cardio and we start with relatively moderate to low food, then where do you go from there? You don't have it. You can't keep adding cardio and decreasing calories. So like, cardio should really be used as a tool towards the end of prep, where if you really need it, then we can increase your expenditure, as opposed to if your calories are already very low, then
that's such an important point. A lot of people, that's why we advocate, like, obviously making people wear like fitness trackers or activity watches, so you can monitor your steps via steps, right? Because towards the back end of the prep, and we hear this a lot. It's like people say, oh, I'm doing hours of cardio, or they're adding more cardio on top, but they're not seeing the results because you spend so much time in the gym exercising, but then you do nothing for the rest of the day. So you're literally compensating each, so you're not actually getting the energy deficit required. Whereas if you can monitor your activity level, at least that's one variable that you tick off. And obviously we know that as you get leaner into prep, it's so much easier to, like, because obviously you're going to feel tired all the time, right? Or for a lot of times where you just, even unconsciously, you blink less frequently and vision less and things like that.
Like resting heart rate goes down, your respiratory rate goes down. Yeah,
so all these things, like, obviously to make you burn less energy, like your body's natural response to active dieting. So it's really important that you actually monitor that, so that at least that's one variable that can have a massive impact, for most people.
Yeah, for sure. All right,
I'm actually really impressed with Alan's NEAT this episode. Like he's
I've noticed that too. Alan's been fidgeting, and I'm like, whoa, man, you're like 9 weeks out. This is actually a good sign. All right, so guys, I think that's actually a pretty good way to wrap up this episode. I know that we are at close to an hour and a half now, and I really thank anyone who's stuck by this long. Hopefully you really enjoyed the chat. But before we head off, Alan, where can people find you and where can they keep up to date with your prep?
Yeah, awesome. You can find me through my Instagram, although like I'm probably not as active as I should be on there. So I need to definitely do a better job with that. So it's on Instagram is Allen Mao 90. So 8, you can spell that. And then also through,
we'll link it in the bio.
Yeah, obviously through Flex Success, that's the business that I work for. The Instagram page or Facebook page as well. So.
Sweet. All right, so guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot, post it to your Instagram stories, tag Alan, tag Jack, tag myself, tag the bodybuilding dietitians, and we'll catch you next week.
See you guys.